Garbage guy, old stories hit high, tells of struggle and strife. Keep your head in the fight. Broken bones in the street, ain't no place for the weak. From the land of the brave, where the words cut deep. Coming next on the air now, feel the despair. Generation X, shout out, shattered somewhere. Rising up from the dark with a fire and spark. Rage and passion combined to leave a lasting mark. Coming next, shouting loud, voices from the crowd. Through the mist of...
Welcome back to the Common X Podcast. If you're new here, this isn't a debate show. It's not a political talk show either. We're interested in thoughtful conversations about the systems that shape everyday life and how regular people actually experience them. Today's conversation is exactly in that lane. We're joined by Peter H. Calfree and Kevin Dolan, co-authors of the book Hijacked. This is not a partisan book, and this is not a political rant. It's a diagnosis. A look at why so many Americans across the spectrum feel like something fundamental isn't working anymore. The book looks at 6 pillars: critical thinking, education, faith, history, politics, and economics, and asks what happens when those foundations erode. Peter, Kevin, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure being here.
Thanks.
Good to be with you.
So what are these 6 pillars, and what is this book about?
Peter, why don't you take it off?
Well, we met perhaps 3 years ago, and it was actually over a November lunch. And Kevin has thought about this numerous years before we even brought this up 3 years ago. And we stumbled across the concept of, hey, why is it that people can't talk now? Why is it people that are talking past each other? What is going on? What happened to people's ability to discourse? The national discourse, the national dialogue seems lost and confused. And again, nobody's really listening. So what happened, and what are the critical components of that? And we quickly identified, I think, critical thinking as being one of the true foundational items that has not really been taught in schools in recent years or decades. The ability, as you might go back in education, to the Country Day movement of the 1950s, but more importantly, we were agrarian and then we were industrial. Even in the 50s, we had reading, writing, and arithmetic. We had an ability to come off World War II and really pound that into people in a way that produced, whether you were at PS 58 in Manhattan or whether you were in Spokane, Washington, you got an education. You knew how to write, read, you knew how to figure. There was no confusion at the checkout counter as to how much change you should get. All of these were basic principles that somehow were hijacked, our term, in the 60s and 70s, and certainly after that, by people's introduction of all sorts of important, but possibly not supportive of general education, which we feel has 3 components: the ability to think, critical thinking, judgment, the use of your basic common sense. What looks wrong may indeed be wrong, but giving you the capacity to figure out why it's wrong and how to make it right, how to question in that process, and then how to speak out about it. Thinking, questioning, and speaking. And all of that led to confusion, and then real, the word I'm looking for is, again, hijacked or malpractice in terms of education of our youth. And that carried us on from education, which like a gentleman named Ray Dalio, who runs a big hedge private equity firm, has had his troops for years study what went wrong with civilizations over the last 3,000 years. And one of the basic principles is that education was hijacked in those. Education was removed from the population itself. Education was not allowed for most people. Education was what the king, the monarch, the dictator wanted. And so that then led into this whole discussion of, okay, well, who were those monarchs? Who were those kings? Who were those dictators? And that led into, well, they usually combined that with some sort of faith program. And religion, faith, and values, eternal truths got shoved aside as to what the one person living today that seemed to run things wanted you to think. And then he would tell you what history was. Well, no, history was something. No, it wasn't. It's what I say it is. George Orwell, 1984. Yep. And then politics and economics. And Kevin has some comments on those. Those were the 6 items that we wanted to integrate to prove the thesis that things are getting hijacked in our republic. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. And we're going to save democracy. Well, no, if you're a democracy, you're Switzerland. One vote, vote for things, it's all done. We're bicameral, we're executive, judicial, and legislative. Just and we can't seem to get anything done there either. Again, hijacked. So, Kevin, I might let you pick that up in politics and economics because you certainly have some buzzwords that I agree with.
Well, thanks, Peter. Yeah, Peter does a great job. His background is pretty amazing. He went to Phillips Exeter for his high school experience, and then Stanford, and then Chicago's Booth School for Business, which is one of the top 5 in the country, and sometimes ranks top number 1. Great school. So Peter's exceedingly intelligent, and it was just a delight for. I hope Peter feels the same way, that the two of us, well, there were 3 years we never had an argument. It was always, we might challenge each other, but there was never an argument. It was really an exchange of ideas, which to me was an example of critical thinking. And with regard to the economics and politics of the situation, carrying on from the pillars to prepare you to be able to talk about your political environment and your economic environment. Now, as they relate to each other, which they do hugely, the economic system serves at the convenience of the political system, meaning that if the political system wants to ruin the economic system, unintended or otherwise, it is fully capable of doing so because it is a superior system. If you put in rules and laws that ruin economic activity, what are you going to do? The rules and laws, regulations were put in place, and now people try and work around it and still execute their functionalities, but they may not be able to if political policies and laws, rules, regulations are so ill-conceived and then passed. So that's a big understanding, is that the economic system serves at the convenience of the political system. To me, that's a huge phrase. Then on the economic system, what are we trying to do? Well, you're trying to harness the power of pursuit of self-interest. We don't have enough policemen and everybody else to go and supervise everybody. So what do you want? You want people incentivized and motivated to behave properly within society, to function, achieve their personal goals, provide for their family, be good citizens in the country. Okay, well, that sounds like a great concept, but what's the foundation for that? The foundation that I would suggest is Rousseau and the social contract. In Rousseau's social contract, written in the 1700s, my interpretation is that we enter into a social contract. Why? Because we want to avoid being in a Darwinistic society where someone that wants to just hammer me with a mallet or a hammer or whatever, take things away from me because he's more physical than I am, then what good does it do to me to be curious and to create something new and something interesting that my society might enjoy? So if I want to be protected and then be able to pursue my self-interest, I need to have a social structure that is set up to protect the individual. If we're going to do that, I enter into a contract under Rousseau's concept, and in that contract, I'm saying instead of being accepting a Darwinistic system, I want to be under the rules, laws, regulations. But what goes along with that is that while I am therefore somewhat protected, and not perfect guarantees, but quite good if you've got a good rule of law, then I can pursue what I want to, but I have an obligation. It's a contract. It's a two-way street. I also have to participate effectively within this society that I'm being protected under. And in so doing, if I disagree with something, there are mechanisms through which I am allowed and can make an effort to bring about improvements to what it currently exists. Man has been here for millions of years in many regards, and the evolution of mankind, the evolution of the world. And in the process, we're here for a nanosecond, for a blink of an eye relative to the history of the world. And in so doing, people, well, I want this right now. So you understand we're evolving. It's not right now. It's I see some problems. I'm going to express myself. I'll participate in the system, and by participating in the system, like writing this book, getting it into the podcast, discussing it, we're hoping to expand people's minds so that they can more effectively participate and they can identify where there are problems. And then they can say, well, here's some solutions. Well, okay, now first off, you're saying you've got a problem. My statement to that one is, have you identified the real problem? You may have identified a symptom. If you're answering a symptom, it's whack-a-mole. You're going to knock it down and no one's going to come up and you're going to continue whack-a-mole game. But if you really have identified the problem, now you alter with critical thinking some alternative solutions. And then what do? Well, you use litmus tests to determine whether or not those solutions could work. And if you think that one
Kevin,
works well, you say, is it sustainable? Big litmus test. Is it consistent? You can't have a society where I get to make this rule, but I'm going to change it for that, change it for this, change it for X, Y, Z. People want to know they're going to be treated consistently. So in this discussion, as we enter into things in more detail, one of the points I'd like to make is that it bounces around between the foundation of critical thinking was supported by education, religion, faith values, and history. History, you don't want to repeat mistakes. Well, don't do the same thing over and over again because you understood history. So if we talk about different things, we're going to pull back in education. We're going to pull back in values system, which is so important. We're going to pull back in history in the situation, and we're going to try to understand the dynamic process of the political system existing effectively and appreciating the economic system, of which we think the best design, if you go back to our founding fathers, the most brilliant people ever, probably, you then can identify what they created, which was
I have one thing I want to interject is that along those lines that Kevin is discussing, things begin to go awry when you are more immediate. Kevin mentioned that. When you talk about, I want something today, we're evolving. No, I want to evolve today. And it goes to some of the most obvious examples. There was a legendary coach of baseball. I think his name was Scalino. He's in our book. He gave a speech once about what's wrong with our society. What's wrong is that we want to change the dimensions of a baseball plate, home plate. We want to change the dimensions because, oh, that pitcher's having a tough day. Make it bigger. Here's his, oh, you want a trophy for showing up? Here's a trophy. Have a trophy. Boy, aren't you good. You have a trophy. You showed up. That's terrific. And now we get into that problem of fairness and the ability to isolate what is good for society and that social contract from what we all want to do. We all want to be liked. We want to be fair. We want to be kind. We want to be a lot of things. But you know what? I'll give you a couple of quotes. One of which is Charlie Munger, who co-founded Berkshire Hathaway, probably one of the richest men ever in the United States, in the world. He said he'd rather deal with inequality in life for some and a functioning capitalist system for many than poverty for all. And here we have that social discord. Oh my gosh, you mean some people are not going to be treated as fairly as other people? That's a function of education, and what Kevin likes to introduce is competition in the educational sphere. So you really do have competitive thoughts and promises. Somebody like the Russian Solzhenitsyn who defected from Russia. Human beings are born with different capacities. If they're free, they are not equal. If they are equal, they're not free. I mean, we have a lot of these quotes in the book, and it all ties to this whole concept of, hey, let's get back on track to what we were founded to be, to which Kevin alluded, the Declaration of Independence, the fact that we have rights, inalienable rights, but it's up to us to execute them. And it goes back to George W. Bush and No Child Left Behind. Well, we move them ahead. Early 1990s, 2000s, move them ahead. Well, it may take, you look like a brilliant guy. Now, you might do something in 3 weeks. I might take 12 weeks, but we both mastered that topic. And so then we move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, all within our control and purview. So getting back to these principles is what led us to investigate and integrate all 6 chapters.
So I want to address something you said, Peter, about, that whole instant gratification culture we've seemed to have become, right? Like, I think, I see it a lot with my kids and like playing video games, social media, the narratives. You got to get the likes and the clicks, right? Have people reinforce what you're talking about. Is there a way that you think, like, is social media kind of to blame for a lot of this? Or is it just the lack of education of people today and our education system's kind of broken?
I think it's the latter. I don't know if you can blame an industry, governed as it might be, governed by First Amendment and governed by all of the various influences that are nefarious and negative that come into that discussion. I think you can go to education and really put it back. Not instant gratification is I don't want to deal with that. Jared, we're having a conversation. I know I'm right, so I really don't want to deal with that. If it feels good, do it, which is how the 70s were. I'm not hurting anybody. If it feels good, do it. Hey, let's go. That is not education. That's instant gratification, and you're learning nothing, and you're going to be left behind. I can show you 20 other quotes that say you're going to be left behind. And but that's not fair. Well, somebody said many years ago, life isn't fair. So
Right.
You just have to roll with the punches, get up, pull yourself up, get back into the game, but understand what you're trying to do with this mastery of transcript, mastery of concept, mastery of educational principles, reading, writing, arithmetic, getting into AI, understanding math, science, knowing what you can do to contribute to society under that social contract to which Kevin refers. And all of that's very helpful and allowable under capitalism, which is not under socialism. It's not under fascism, not under Nazism, not under communism, not under anything else. We pulled billions and billions of people out of poverty through capitalism. Oh, but it's so mean. It's so ruthless. All I can tell you is, and some days it is.
Well, I think that the test that I would use, and I'll bring in one of the people that we quote most abundantly in the book, and give you a little picture of the structure. Not only are the 6 pillars there that you referred to, Ian, but we've got Peter was big on readability. So we try to have each chapter kind of flow, and it's not long. It's 109 pages in those 6 chapters, intro and a conclusion. But following that, we thought that there's some very important points, some ideas, but some very important points to make and support some of the chapters with appendices. So we numbered the appendices by chapter. If it applied to chapter 1, it'd be 1 ABC. If it applied to chapter 5, it'd be 5 ABCD, kind of thing. So if you read the chapter, and you can read through the book quickly, but then after you do that, if you read through the chapter and then you go to the applicable appendices, you'll find out more supportive information. In this particular topic of quotes, that we have an appendix that's strictly quotes, and it's basically done from people's birth time frame, which goes back millennia to classical quotes, all the way up to present. But that appendix is led off by Thomas Sowell, who went to University of Chicago, Peter's school, and he got a PhD. And Milton Friedman said to the foundation that he was going to request a grant for Thomas Sowell. He said he's a communist right now, but we think he'll come around. Well, this is a black economist that not only came around, he's rejected, as so well described by Jason Riley in his book Maverick, a biography on Thomas Sowell, where he explains his lifetime of going through and what he overcame, what he did, what he achieved, and how he got to be a PhD, and now at the end of his life at the Hoover Institute, 90 plus, out in Stanford, another alma mater of Peter's. And this guy has got the pithiest quotes you could ever hope to achieve. In very short order, he puts in phraseology something that just jumps out at you. And so we led off the entire quote section with him, and that's one of the premier pieces of the book in my mind. There's so much wisdom in that section. And Thomas Sowell is one of the keys. And he was put down by his fellow in race, fellow blacks, by many academics, black academics, because he didn't support their narrative. He's an empiricist. He wants to prove everything statistically. Is it true? Don't say it's true because you've got an anecdotal piece of information. Say it's true because this happened 95, 85% of the time. Now we see that it's demonstrably a very frequent situation and seems to be true. He's wonderful. So we hope that what this book does and the rest of our conversation today demonstrates you can't talk about one thing without bringing in other things. Like if we're talking about politics or economics, but you go back and you say, well, what's the foundation? You know, were we consistent in our application? What's the concept of leadership all about? We can talk about that.
And this is where we not so quickly identified what we wanted to do, and in reference to Thomas Paine, whom you may recognize the name, is in the Revolutionary War, and he is the one who authored anonymously what is a pamphlet of 4 separate tracts put together of common sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in all of us. I mean, if in the religion, faith, and value section, it's not a religious chapter, but it talks about eternal truths. And we're kind of born with, hey, you know, if Tommy hits me at school, that hurts. You begin to pick it up. You begin to understand how the real world works. And that common sense, we just wanted to bring that back to the full front and center, first row of discussion. That, look, you don't have to be taught this. You were born with it in most cases. So let's bring that to the front and recognize the fairness, the inequality of life that over time allows for all of us to be better than we were. If we're working it, Jared, you brought up education, and that was a critical issue of how we get back on the right track. An understanding of history. How did Nazism come in, and where was it hijacked? What happened to that population? 100 million Germans, and they're all automatons. I mean, they didn't. Well, fascinating history and what can happen when you have identity politics. Boy, is that a topic today. When you have not civic duty, but identity politics, where you identify with a race, with a population, with a geographic area, with whatever. All that reeks of, as far as I'm concerned, is exactly what happened in Germany, in Mussolini in 1921, and Germany in 1931 to 33 with Hitler. All of that, this is history. You've got to understand it and use your common sense, but this is not new. We just want to get back to, hey, it's not new, but get with the program and learn it.
Yeah, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I see us repeating it, right? We're getting there to, like you said, we're kind of in this clique mentality. Right. You know, it's honestly like our political system's become like high school, right? Like the jocks and the geeks and the nerds and, you know, the cheerleaders. And it seems like you said, it's all identity politics around, well, I'm marginalized and I need a voice, so I should speak louder than everybody else, and we should placate to everybody. And I don't
exactly.
And I, like you said, common sense isn't that common anymore, and that's kind of one of the reasons Ian and I started this podcast. You know, Common Sense from Generation X, and trying to bring back that shared narrative of, look, we may disagree on a lot of things, but there's actually a lot more things that unite us and bring us together than divide us. So,
absolutely.
Pull everybody back to center is kind of what our narrative is.
No, I think that's great, and we both really appreciate the opportunity to discuss these things because it led to the book and readability. Kevin refers to it. It was a um, we just we wanted it to be fun to read. There was a point in time where we could have put 3,200 footnotes. And my
Right.
statement from day one was I never wanted to have a footnote in this book. If people don't like what we think, throw it away. If people are intrigued with what they think, read it again. But we don't need footnotes to prove the obvious. And as far as we're concerned, the vast majority of this book put in one compendium is fairly obvious. We are so off the center and so in the wilderness. Let's get back to what is obvious and common sense and what made us great. Hence, Kevin's reference to the founders. The Declaration of Independence is the most amazing first time ever that the individual was separated from his government and his political system to be on his or her own without reference to what they're told to be or what they're ordered to be or what they were born into being. Absolutely astounding that had to, and that is a direct attack on all other religions, Western or Eastern, I don't care, that grabbed hold of your brain and fried it.
Well,
So
you're exactly right. And if you look at history, Gutenberg press, that's where the printing press was developed, was invented. And in so doing, you understand history, you go back in history before that. Education was a process of the powerful trying to maintain their power. They only allowed designated individuals to be educated. But the interesting process is that as the world became smaller and smaller through trade and seafaring economic activities, you had to train, these people had to be trained, and they had to develop the ability to navigate. And the captains, went through that process before they became a captain. Well, some young persons learning to trade and they're becoming, navigator, and then later on in their process they do well. Well, it's education. Now there are different forms of education, granted, but they had to go through that, and people were motivated to say, I want to improve my life. So it's not to be given to me. I will work hard to have as good a life as I can have under the current system. I don't expect things to be given to me. And as a matter of fact, one of the quotes says, Ben Carson said, like, when you think you have some problems and you need the government to solve the problem, you may find out that the problem was created by the government. And so, like, when
at
we're
some
talking
point, maybe we
about
will wake up
deficit,
and recognize that the
that's for
politicians
sure.
created our problems.
Right.
There you go. When we're talking about debts and deficits and what the government has created in a situation, there's a section in there. Titler, a Scottish individual, historically is one of the appendices. One of the last, I think it's on page 207 or something. And he said that when a democracy republic realizes they can vote themselves benefits, you will see the beginning of the decline of that organization, that country. Well, that's the reason there's a limitation of how long a country can last. Well, our book is about saying, well, if we don't pay any attention, this exactly will happen with us. But if you realize when the government says, "Oh, I did this for you and I spent this money," well, they took it from someone to spend on someone else, or they borrowed it. If they borrowed it, then you've got to pay the interest on what they gave to some other functionality. And so what you want them to do is do what's necessary to help society make progress, but you don't want to take on additional debt, etc. And and therefore you want to call the politicians and say, don't spend any money you don't need to. I don't want that. Now people say, well, let the rich pay for it. Well, that doesn't work. The rich is only a certain segment of the population. If you want to have a policy where you're putting some program in place, the rich aren't going to be able to cover it for the entire nation. Okay, there's only a small segment.
That's the origin of there's a certain person received a Nobel Prize in economics for modern monetary theory. and Kevin and I, between us, have read probably half a dozen books on that. They're very, very popular in the last 10 years, 15 years. Basically says debt doesn't matter. Pay yourself interest on the debt. And we control the printing press, so we're going to be fine. Well, debt does matter. Now, see, that's a classic case of, wow, yeah, Nobel Prize. Wow, he must know what he's talking about. Wow. And you read the book and you, wait a second, this chapter's full of you know what. This chapter doesn't make sense. And I mean, it's skeptical, cynical. Where's truth? Kevin's questions. I need to know more. I don't think I agree with you over here. But very few people did it. And the guy is quoted even in the last month. I saw him on some newscast in New York City. And oh my gosh, that doesn't pass the smell test. Common sense. Any discussion of anything in the world says pay your debts, don't get too much in debt, you're going to go broke. Except this is a great concept. No, we don't have to go broke because we don't have to pay ourselves debt back. We can just pay interest and move on.
And right, we can just print more money, right? And
yeah, you can print more money.
Problem when you don't have anything that ties that
and this
money to anything physical anymore, right?
Yeah,
so you just print it.
And this brings up the point of the mainstream media. You made a point here, Jerry, and both of you, I think, guys said, what is the transition in media? Okay, and is it good or bad or whatever? Well, I think that there's a combination of good and bad in terms of this transition. But one of the great things about it is the mainstream media that is a king at cocktail conversation sound bites, which don't do any analysis, but they present the soundbite to make their case for something. And so people go like, oh, that's the truth. No, it's not. They're not questioning things. So
they don't research it for themselves.
You need something more in depth.
Right.
Well, this podcast does. That's what I think is one of the great things. With technology now, many people independently can create means like this podcast to have a great conversation concentrated for an extended period of time to really get into the heart of an issue. And if you don't doing that, this soundbite routine, a cocktail conversation. I mean, if you've ever been, my example is you get in a cocktail party, you start something with, there's a group of guys you're interested in, etc. But a friend of yours comes in. What do? You stop everything because they're a friend. You're bringing them in. It's a party, and so but it loses the track of thought. So where do you maintain a full track? Well, you've got to have a format, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a dinner party that's designed to do it in depth. But it needs that, and to be able to cover topics and get to the meat of the issues. And we talk about inalienable rights, but what are those? In the founding fathers, the inalienable rights, because they were Christian, these are inalienable rights given to us not by man, but by God. So if we believe in inalienable rights, you already, and you say, and you want to refer to inalienable rights, you're referring to something given to us by God. Now, if you're an atheist, okay, fine. Well, then you don't believe in inalienable rights, because this is not rights that humankind just said, oh, you have this right and that right and that right. No, the founding fathers in their faith and religion created their documents, and to show how
basically said you've got to have faith. You've got to have a value system, a moral foundation. Call it what you will. I don't care. But it has the strength of eternity behind it. And if you don't have that, you're quickly jumping into the chapter or the discussion about nihilism, Nietzsche, and how there's nothing. There's nothing, and therefore we don't need to care about anything. Now, how fast to jump from that to what has happened in history with, may I suggest, 55 to 60 million people have been slaughtered since the Holocaust in 89 different pogroms or attacks within countries on people they didn't like. You think we would have solved the problem with 6 million in the Holocaust? Now you've almost 60 million people slaughtered, literally slaughtered in the streets. We haven't learned a thing. And we're optimistic. If you read the book, 109 pages plus the references, we're very optimistic. That's why we call it, our republic, hijacked our republic, unless we can save it. And we think you can save it. There's no inalienable fact pattern that says 243 years we're going to go under, as Titler might suggest, as any of the others. It's just, we can bring it out. We could be unique in the history of human condition. So,
Well, but when our forefathers created the Constitution, it starts with "we, the people of the United States," right? Like, I think the biggest problem with America today and the Western culture is we've become that society of me. I say this a lot in our
yes,
podcast, and Ian's heard it a billion times, I'm sure. But we need to get back to that society of we and stop being a society of me because it's all selfish end goals. And what we should be doing is building that narrative back to we as a people, we as a species, honestly, humans on the same planet. Because like at the end of the day, we're all living on the same ball, hurtling through
absolutely.
space. And if we don't want to wipe ourselves out, we need to figure this crap out pretty quick.
No,
Yeah,
very true.
it's
Um,
urgent.
Kevin, so back to your critical thinking there. How do you think we teach people how to think without telling them what to think? I'd
Well,
like to hear your
I
thoughts
think
on that.
first off, children, they're talking, they hear things, but they go to school. What's the first thing they do? They learn the alphabet. And then they learn how to read. Now, there you read things, but in courses I took as you got older, people would ask you what your interpretation of something is. So if you're talking about critical thinking, you're saying, first off, I'm thinking. And in the process of thinking, I'm going to ask questions of myself. That's how I'm going to process my information myself. So you tell people you need to ask your own questions of yourself and think through it. Is this a solution? Is this what's the problem? Sometimes you say, I think this is a problem. First question, is that the problem or is it a symptom? Now you've got a technique, but you're asking yourself this question. And then you're working with a group of people. You do the same thing. We say that this is a problem. Well, folks, is this a problem or is it a symptom? Because if we're going to solve a symptom, we're going to play whack-a-mole for the next 30 years. So we don't want to play whack-a-mole. What we want to do is find a real problem, find a real solution, and then we come up with some alternative solutions to what we hope is the real problem. If we do that, you then say, okay, here's several solutions. We think this is good. Litmus questions. What is this sustainable? If we put this in place, can this be sustained indefinitely? Can we sustain the debt of the government, 38 trillion and growing forever? No, you can't. So therefore, it's not a good solution. This is not print your own money monetary theory. They're nuts. Um, the so you got
Kevin,
sustainability.
along those lines, is the incentive and motivation system consistent with society values? Here we go again. These are not separate tracks that we just put together and it looks
Yeah,
good. They're all interwoven. It's a fabric, and we're weaving that
fabric of
fabric
society.
of society and the social contract, and it's all connected, and it can be very positive if we just grab hold of those ideas that helped us get founded and were existing long before that but never actualized until this bizarre taking on a country with a system that ruled the world with and they thought they'd send 4,000 troops to wipe us out, and it took 5, 6, 7 years, and my God, they kind of won. So the power of the idea alone, I was just picking up. Go ahead, Kevin. I was like, look for causality and identify those contributing actions. Your judgment, your experience, the common sense innately in you. All of those need to be allowed, and the classroom, frankly, should allow for thinking, questioning, speaking. And you say, well, Pete, this is all scientific. We got science now. We got AI. We got all of that. You don't logic that. That just happens. That's what it's either right or wrong. Well, I go back to Einstein and imagine in 1890 you said, well, time curves. First of all, what does that mean? I have no idea what that means. Time curves. Well, speed of light. In fact, things are woven and go warp holes and black holes, and uh, if Einstein hadn't thought questions that were not relevant to those who came prior, where would we be? And that's the type of questioning that, frankly, educators need to get back to. They've been promoted and
Yeah,
encouraged to teach.
it's a curiosity of the thing. What we want to teach people, I mean, every entrepreneur, every student, everybody else and everything, it starts with curiosity. but your tools are the education, reading and writing, okay, and math, because some things you're gonna need some mathematical equations or otherwise. As we approach artificial intelligence, this is a whole new area, but we do mention it in a concluding thoughts because it is a very scary area. It's scary because it's moving so rapidly. What are we doing to control it? Now you can't slow it down because China is going to abuse it and do what Mayo did, was killing 30 million people under his rule. So we've got to protect against that. So we've got to let it develop, but competition will let it develop. But what are we doing? Well, the algorithms, when they say that, and you ask a question of ChatGPT or
Rock.
from Google, Gemini, I think it is.
Gemini,
Some
yeah.
of the first versions with their algorithms were being politically correct. So Scandinavians could be people of color. I'm sorry,
Right.
that historically is wrong. I want the truth. So Musk is very interesting with Grok, with Tesla, and Grok has now actually been introduced into Tesla and the cars. But their artificial intelligence, in pursuit of the real truth, statistically, empirically, can be proven with very reasonable strength of position. Whereas if you get something and a competition between the artificial intelligence algorithms and they're producing the wrong thing, some of them would be shown to produce the wrong thing, like I just described, and so they're not going to be acceptable. So the competition is what is going to help artificial intelligence actually create good results. But how do you get there? The kids have to be engineers. Well, where do they get the education to be engineers? And when you're doing an algorithm, what's the foundation for that? Do you have a philosophical, religious value system base for that? I think if you come back around to it, the inalienable rights and religion are fundamental to understanding things. So people would say, well, religion, you're free to be religion, but that's a separate, we're going to hold it off. No, it's what created Western man. Look at the founding fathers. They were strongly influenced. And so for the first time ever, we created a republic that, with human beings having inalienable rights, and the government serves the people, not the other way around. And people don't get that. They got this big mothership government that they want to take care of everything. No, what you really want to realize is what Carson said, is the government is the problem in many cases. Now, there's things that you can't deal with, like the military. You need the military. But there's so many things that the government is not the solution to this stuff. It's crazy. So we have to be able to have good conversations that are broadly understood by bringing in as Ian said, the pillars of this book, the forces that they put to work. And education competition is a huge issue because the children are the seed corn to our future. And we have got to improve the educational system. I think Randy Weingarten may be the worst thing ever happened to education. And I'll make a comparison of my union experience as a pilot for American Airlines. We as much as you could make a human capital theory approach to what the value is based on the economic risk of the job, for losing a job if a company goes out of business versus the investment made in you. High risk should demand a high rate of return. Big investment should mean you get a really significant wage. But in that process, we're competing. So we can't take a wage that goes way beyond what other people are paying. We could demand it, but if the company accepted it, we might make them unprofitable and they might fail because of the wage that they gave us. But when you've got a monopoly in the government, in education and everything, it's a single union. There's no competition. So notice that the education group or public education doesn't want the parochial school, private school, home
charter
schooling,
schools,
all the different
vouchers,
forms that they have, because that's competition. But it's outside of their realm. They don't control it, right? And since they're doing a poor job of controlling where they have the exposure to the majority of our children, they're doing a terrible job because they're indoctrinating, they're not educating. So Ian, I hope I began to address, what your question was there, but it brings a lot of stuff in, and education is the fundamental, along with understanding that religion and
And
value.
all of that is tied. Indoctrination leads to mob rule, leads to dependence, leads to exactly what Titler, the Scottish gentleman in 1842, wrote about. In fact, it's a very interesting. Kevin referred to it, and he said, from bondage to faith, faith to courage, courage to liberty, liberty to abundance, abundance to selfishness, selfishness to apathy, apathy to dependence, dependence back into bondage. And that's the cycle that many people have made reference to. So
I appreciate that too, Peter. Back to what you were saying about values, like what values actually help a society function, in your opinion?
Um, they're more macro. The actual values to which I refer are really having to do with the golden rule, um, being responsible, being
You're going to
accountable.
have to define that golden rule, right? Because I think a lot of people haven't heard that nowadays.
Or I've got the gold, I'm ruling. No.
Yeah, it's been hijacked. There you go.
That's
No, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Every
Right.
religion has that reference, has that ability to relate to your fellow person, male or female, in the society, and there is that societal tapestry interwoven into your personal conduct, which led Rousseau to, and much of his life leading to that. Okay, you're an individual. That's all you have. Oh no, society. That's all we have. No, the individual contract with society, and there are certain what I call eternal truths that exist from Plato and Socrates all the way to today. And they're embedded in the political statements like Maggie Thatcher. The problem with socialism is you run out of other people's money. These are kind of basic understandings of how the world works. It goes beyond value. That's why I don't want to get stuck into a religious connotation as much as how do you live your life? Why do you get up every morning? What is it that motivates you to get out of bed and do something? What do you want to do? How do you expect to be treated? How do you integrate and interrelate with those you meet day after day after day? Those are values that, frankly, Kevin and I talk about this. You learn on the ball field, you learn in your classroom, you learn with your buddies. Why is it that all over the world, soccer games and football games and baseball games and all other sports, you get 8-year-olds and they can figure it out fast? And you're over here. Here, no, here's the base. Here's this. Here's the plate. And they're in 4 minutes, they're playing the game because they kind of have an intuition of what is fair and right. What are the rules of the road? Those are the kinds of values to which I refer, which frankly are ignored. If you watch the news every night, you go nuts because it's ignored in Washington. It's ignored in many, many cities. It's ignored. It's ignored. It's ignored around the world. Pick a topic and it's ignored. There were certain things ignored in Australia, ignored in Gaza, ignored.
Yeah.
What good?
To me, the religious process that Ian questioned is the foundation. When the kids go to the ball game, they're going to play the baseball diamond. Many kids, when we were raised, and I think there's still Judeo-Christian influence, is that there's a value system that has already been somewhat passed on to the children. Now, not all cases. And so you see parents fighting at organized little league games and stuff like that. I mean, the worst example possible. But as Peter described, kids in matter of minutes can understand the basics and participate in it. And we as adults can reinforce a value system based on the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is a huge. You go the 10 Commandments, but the golden rule addresses all 10 of the 10 Commandments. And I don't care whether you're religion you're from, etc. I respect all religions to a degree. I have had a bad experience. I had a Iranian at pilot training that I helped get through pilot training, brought him home for Christmas. He was a really good guy. We had a nice time, but you saw what's evolved between the embassy in that situation. And then 9/11 happens, And a friend of mine, Chick Burlingame, was the captain on the 7.5 that went into the Pentagon. He was already dead. They'd already cut him with the box cutters, I guess, and that kind of thing. So I I have a problem with a religion that a theocracy. We talk about different forms of government. Well, monarchism, a theocratic, socialism, communism, fascism, uh, they're all end up being autocratic in nature eventually. If you look at the communists, when Mao took over, they ran through. He had his cadres that supported him, but when he got to where he got, he eliminated his competition. When Castro won the war in Cuba, he eliminated his competition. When Stalin achieved supremacy in Russia, they're calling it communism, but it was an autocracy. He eliminated the competition. So are these guys really doing everything for that? No, people live in a communist country because it's the only vehicle that they have. So if they want to live a superior life, they have to be members of the party and work up this thing because it's singularity. There isn't any other competition. There's no other means of doing anything. You control the economy, you control the politics, you control everything. And so if I want a perk and a group of perks, then I pursue being in the party to get benefits. But everyone's not treated equally. There's benefits if you're in the party. So when the Communist Party said, talk about the equality of everybody, they're lying. It's elitists.
Along those lines, Kevin, nobody ever says that Marx and Engels, these are two kids, their 20s and 30s. They never worked a day in their lives.
Yep.
And they created a system that was guaranteed to fail, but caused misery for decades, if not centuries.
Yeah.
It's absolutely astounding that overcame. Well, it tied in with people's rise and wanting more and more, and having a distribution of wealth and so forth and so on. But there's the critical thinking. These are two bozos that sat in England, wrote this damn book, and I'm going to take from you and give it to them, and so forth and so on. Just nobody thought that through, and now we have hundreds of millions of people dead, billions of people surviving under communism, from Pol Pot in Cambodia to Cuba to wherever, all with a false narrative. Let's put it that way. And that's the kind of thing we want to bring back.
Now, Peter, if people take one thing away from Hijacked, what do you want it to be?
I want it to be an understanding that there is an imperative of the individual, and it's an obligation almost to think critically, to understand. Pick the topic. I don't know. Pick any one of the chapters. Pick other chapters. I don't care. Think critically. Think it through. Question specifically, and then speak. Speak out or speak about what it is you've thought about and questioned, so that you can make some progress in your life and move ahead in whatever it is that you've chosen to do.
And I might add
Kevin,
with an
go ahead.
open mind. If you commit to being wrong, because here's my logic, I thought about it, this is my conclusion, and you're saying I'm right. Well, how embarrassing is it at that point to say, you introduced new information, but I can't accept it because I'm be too embarrassed to say I'm wrong. So if you start off with a conversation with I could be wrong, but here's my logic and conclusion, then you're open-minded to receiving new information that you haven't stated yet that might alter your opinion. It may not, but you're not embarrassed if you do alter your opinion because you introduced your open-mindedness as the introduction to the discussion.
We've reached a point in the show that we like to call Jared's Five.
All right, so this is where we ask some questions. One question from our previous guest, and then you guys get to ask questions for our next guest. So our previous guest said, if you're on your bucket list, what's your ultimate vacation spot?
Me?
Go
Yeah,
ahead,
both of you.
Peter.
Switzerland.
All right. Kevin?
The original and only true democracy.
The ultimate place is your home to me. If when you've got a nice home and you've got, your family, that to me is the ultimate vacation.
And no, he doesn't have the ocean in his backyard.
Right.
Right. That's not my own. This is just a
His
background.
animated background, yeah.
That's right.
All
Animated
right.
background.
Yeah. So, all right, next one. Favorite movie, Kevin, all time.
Top Gun, I probably pilot.
Original one? Yeah.
Yeah, the original.
All right. Peter?
Sound of Music.
Ooh, both great movies. All right. Did you guys watch cartoons growing up? Favorite cartoon?
Yes.
Peter?
What was that? Wiley, that Roadrunner.
Yeah, the
Oh,
road
yeah,
was
runner.
Wile E.
always,
Coyote, Looney
yeah,
Tunes.
Wiley Coyote. Always ran off the cliff,
Yeah,
but lived.
I like that one.
Yeah,
Same for
both.
me.
All right. Kevin, what's one thing people don't know about you that maybe they should?
Um, that is a excellent and a tough question. Um, I think concern for others. Sometimes people, if you're explaining something, maybe I do it wrong. If they think I'm arrogant, I don't know. I try not to be. And but I care more about service. This book's about giving back. We don't expect commercial success. If we have it, great, but it's not the purpose. The purpose is to give back. So, we're trying. Peter and I are trying to live a life of service here, and we hope that the book contributes to that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I
All
would
right,
agree with
Peter,
that. I
back to
mean,
you. Same thing?
yeah, I would agree with that. And in my career, which is a lot of financial investment planning work, accounting, CPA stuff, I I began to write out, why do I get up every morning? I think I asked Ian, or said it. Um, and I really concluded, after years and years of doing that, I concluded that I get up every morning is to help other people. And what people sometimes may not, because they're not around me enough, they may see me as driven, focused, moving ahead. What should be done? How do we accomplish? What's wrong with this proposal? What's right with this proposal? All of that. It's not as noticeable that I really do care. This book is all about giving back and not having what everyone else has predicted for 5,000 years, what's going to happen, to somehow salvage and save our republic, which was the most brilliant idea ever put forth.
Awesome. All right, Kevin, if you could go back in time and tell your teenage self one thing, what would it be?
I'd say uh, focus on others. I think leadership as a term is one that, if well understood, and it's in the book, there's contributing terminology. Um, I think it's credibility and inspiration, support leadership, but within those two, you have integrity, dependability, consistency, teamwork, determination, and perseverance, and selfless behavior. I think people actually are not aware that it's the selfless behavior when you're giving to others and you get to see the reaction of appreciation that may be the most important response you'll ever get on anything. It's appreciation for your effort for someone else.
Great. Peter, same question to you. Time machine.
Listen more, speak less. It intellectually, I knew that when I was 18. Of course I knew that. Everybody knows that. And I didn't do it as much as I should have for many, many years.
Great advice.
All right. Yeah, it is. All right. Question for our next guest, Kevin.
What is your purpose in life?
Awesome. And Peter?
I'll probably ask whoever that might be and whatever topic it is, why did you do what you did? What is it that compelled you to do what you're discussing on this very show?
Great. Both great questions, guys.
All right, Peter, Kevin, we thank you guys for being here. Everybody, check out their book, Hijacked. And remember to go to commonxpodcast.com to learn more about Kevin Dolan and Peter Calfree in the book. We'll be posting their X-Files blog article shortly, and we'll also be promoting them on all our socials as well. So please show your support, and thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys.
Really do.
Humbled. And thank you for the just being human and selfless. We really appreciate that. I love the humility too.
Well,
that's great.
We hope. Don't do it all the time, but we try.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today to the podcast, Common X with Jared and Ian. We really appreciate you guys and would love your support. So make sure you click that subscribe or like button or follow us on all our social media platforms and on YouTube and Spotify, because that would really help us out. And that helps us bring more episodes to you guys every week, and hopefully from, content that you guys want to see. So reach out, TikTok, YouTube, leave comments. If there's anything that you guys want to see or any guests that you want us to try and get on, let us know. We do have a good lineup coming. So thank you again. We love you guys. Thanks for your support, and we'll see you next time. And remember, common sense isn't that common. So that's why we're bringing common sense back from Generation X.